I'm Joan Landis, happy to be with you. So when we're talking about relationships, it's kind of nice to have kind of the big picture of where we might be in the relationship spectrum. And so one of the ways to think about it is that when we are little babies, our little small children, that we're totally dependent on our caregiver, okay? That's dependence. And we have to start out having a successful dependence. We actually do, in order to lay a foundation for the rest of our relationships. In this successful dependence, we have to become attached to somebody and feel like we can safely trust in them, that they will help us and meet our needs. And so the first stage in healthy relationships is to have this healthy dependence as a youngster. Then, as time goes on, it becomes incumbent upon that youngster to establish their own identity, okay? This starts maybe age 13-ish, whatever, in Western culture, and then goes on for, 10 years, something like that. And so in this process, the dependent child has to start seeking ways that they can become independent, okay? So they become independent. Sometimes there's some relational ruptures there, right? There's a reason that this looks a little bit the same, because sometimes it strains the relationship. Mom or dad want to keep being super protective and controlling and kind of dictate everything about that kid maybe. And the child is like, are you kidding? I need to be myself. And so as part of that independence, the child starts looking for an identity that feels good to them, which is often not the identity that their parents would have for them. And they learn to be more independent by learning to drive, graduating school, getting a job, eventually getting their own place, hopefully, eventually paying their own bills, keeping track of things and their medical care and taking care of their body and just being responsible and independent. So that's a fairly long process to become independent. It's interesting, though, that that sometimes that in that quest to become independent, the child will first just do the opposite of what the mom and dad want. And so it's not true independence. It's kind of a false independence, because it's still actually quite dependent on what mom and dad want, and I'm just going to do the opposite. So if mom and dad want X, this kid is kind of relegated to doing not X. And so he's not entirely independent. He's actually still heavily influenced by mom and dad. It's just that he's kind of rebelling and going to the opposite extreme, not X, right? But he can't really have choices of doing, Y and Z and all these in here, because that might be a little too much like X. So that's just an interesting part too, is as children are trying to become independent, for a while they may actually just do the opposite of mom and dad as their first foray into a new identity. So that's independence. Hopefully that's well established by mid-20s, and people are responsible and they're very independent. Then the next task in relationships is to become what we call interdependent. So we fit together like the gears of a wheel, okay? And that interdependence, there's a little space in there, and just like the gears of a wheel, and it actually increases the power and leverage that we have to accomplish things, okay? Interdependence is a higher level of functioning than independence, or certainly dependence, right? And interdependence actually requires somebody who has been healthily independent first, before they can create a healthy interdependence. Why? Because if we've never been independent, if we've only gone from dependence over to another relationship, this isn't really interdependence, it's codependent, okay? And maybe you've heard that term, where we feel like we're frightened to ever be without this person, that without this person we might not survive. And that kind of panic and that kind of relational anxiety is not healthy, and that can create what we call codependence. Now, there's libraries of books out there and all kinds of videos about codependence. That's not what this is going to be about. But I'm just explaining to you that when we don't go through that healthy independence, very often we kind of have a codependence going on that really isn't healthy. Now, is that the end of the story? No. A lot of times someone will get married when they're young and they haven't really been fully independent yet. They haven't fully developed their own identity, and they get married young, and it's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, I was married when I was 18, yay. But what can often happen is that later on, sometime maybe in their 30s, that person goes, excuse me, I never got to do this stuff. I never got to travel. I never got to my own career. I never got my own identity. I never finished my schooling. And sometimes if that happens, that person who feels kind of gypped, they never really got to feel that normal independence, that they will sometimes start feeling very constrained and kind of panicky, and they will start wanting to, cut relationships and do new things, and very kind of trying to recapture that independence that they never had. And so they'll kind of decide things on their own. They might end relationships. They might start school. They might change careers. They might just do all kinds of stuff. And everyone around them is like, wow, they've really lost their marbles. But really what it is they're trying to do that independent work that they never really did. And so it's pretty important to see if you can go there. So, if you did get married early or you paired off early, then just realize that down the line, it may be entirely normal for either one of the partners to go, hey, I never really had my own time, right? And just expect it and try to work around that and incorporate some of that into your relationship and not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So those are very important things to understand about our relationships, that healthy dependence and attachment is so important, and then that healthy independence is so important in order to create that healthy and high leverage interdependence instead of codependence. So I hope that helps. If you find that you think that maybe your relationship is a little too codependent or something like that, I'm sure there's things on the website, on the web where you can go and Google that and see if you can get some good information. I'll post some resources also, and just notice maybe where you are on that spectrum. Are you dependent? Are you independent right now? Are you interdependent? Or are you codependent? Just see what you think. And like I said, I'll post some resources down there, and get on the forums and let us know where you think you are, and how maybe you could move towards more advanced levels of relationships. So it's been grand being with you. Hope to hear from you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.